Now, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel says she's optimistic she'll form a coalition government almost 4 months after the country's general election. Talks have resumed in Berlin between her Christian Democrat Party and its former coalition partners, the Social Democrats, who vow to go into opposition. A potential sticking point, though, the refugee crisis and whether to allow the relatives of immigrants to join them in Germany. Well, the SPD has governed jointly with the Christian Democrats for 8 of the last 12 years. After the party suffered a punishing defeat at last year's election, leader Martin Schulz promised to take it into opposition. But pressure is now mounting on him to do a deal with Merkel, since her proposal for a coalition with the Greens and Liberal FDP fell through.
I think we can do it. We will work very quickly, very intensively. That's what we set out to do. And always think about what people in Germany are expecting of us, who always hope that politics will solve their problems and create the framework for people to live well in our country. I am optimistic about these talks, but I also know that there is a lot of work ahead of us in the coming days. We are willing to take on the work.
Al Jazeera's David Hayter has more from Berlin.
This has been the longest coalition talks that we've had in post-war political German history. It's running up almost to 4 months now, and the people of Germany have been under a caretaker government. It's very important for Angela Merkel and her prospective coalition partners to actually sort out in these talks, and remember, they're only talks about talks, in the next 5 days, exactly where the red lines are, what formula they can get, where immigration is, how can they get another formula to reshape immigration policies and coalesce those policies in some way. It is going to be, as Angela Merkel said in her statement before the talks began, a lot of hard work, but she said she was optimistic, and her Social Democratic partner, Martin Schulz, her prospective partner, said there should be no red lines. But there is a lot at stake. It shows essentially that the power at the heart of the European Union, that was Angela Merkel. She was the one that had the strong partnership with France, is beginning to erode. She's less popular now. The people of Germany are almost dismayed by what's happening, how long it's taking, and they want a result. And in fact, during these 5 days, there will be more or less a media blackout. They don't want the sort of interviews they had during the last coalition talks, which started feeding in to the actual coalition talks and actually increasing friction. So we're not going to hear much about what's happening, but I think they all are concentrated to make sure there will not be another general election and there will not be a minority government. It's in all their interests to come to a solution.
Well, joining me now in the studio is Leopold Target, who is a policy analyst at the think tank Open Europe. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us on the News Hour. So Angela Merkel is confident about this new round of coalition talks with her old partners. Is this confidence misplaced? How difficult might these negotiations be?
Well, the upcoming negotiations certainly will be difficult. There are a lot of thorny issues to be discussed on migration, on social security, on EU policy. And the Social Democrats have upped their price of what they will demand to join government once more. Nevertheless, I still think there's a lot of common ground between two parties, ground they share. And I think if they're both flexible and willing to compromise, we will in fact see another grand coalition emerging.
What are the key obstacles?
One of the key obstacles is certainly the question of immigration, where the Conservatives are pushing for an upper limit on how many refugees to get into Germany each year, to limit family reunification for those already in Germany. These are points where the Social Democrats are pushing for a far more open approach towards refugees. Then there's questions about social security, whether the Social Democrats want to reform the system to make it unitary, and as well as questions about the European Union, for example, where the Social Democrats are way more federalist and are far more aligned with the French President Emmanuel Macron.
And Merkel is her position on Europe?
She's also pro-European, there's no doubt about that. But I think she's far more cautious about how far she's willing to go along with the ideas of Emmanuel Macron. She would also, for example, be fine with creating a European Monetary Fund or with having a Eurozone budget. But it would not be as large scale, for example, as the Social Democrats would like to have it.
What's at stake here? What are Angela Merkel's options if these talks fail?
The risk is that if these talks fail, there are not many good options left on the table. The only two things she can still do then is, first of all, to do a minority government, where it would rely on flexible...
She's ruled that out,
majority,
right?
Which she has ruled out, but People have ruled out a lot over the last weeks in Germany and then come back to it, so we never know. And the second one would be new elections. But if we look at the polls, we see that the result would basically be the same as in September. The Greens have gone up a bit, the Free Democrats have gone down a bit, but basically the result of new elections would be the same, and so it's quite unlikely.
Right, so if she was to run for the chancellorship again, her performance would not be any stronger or any weaker than the inconclusive election last September. It would be virtually the same.
If we look at the polls, it would be virtually the same. Obviously, people change their minds, but most likely things would not really change.
What are the problems for her in terms of her position within her own party?
Well, for the last 12 years, Merkel has been the uncriticized champion of her party, basically. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the imminent demise of Merkel, about her exit from the political stage, but this has largely been doom-mongering, really exaggerated. If we look at the current polls, we still see that 9 out of 10 supporters of her party think she does a good job as a chancellor and want her to run again and govern the next 4 years. So she still is in a strong position, but nevertheless, people obviously start to think about who comes afterwards, who will succeed her, and where will the party go.
The question of migrants and refugees appears to have been quite a significant turning point in terms of Angela Merkel's stance on the domestic front, but when you look at the uncertainty emanating from Washington, D.C. right now, under President Donald Trump, and then the problems that you have here in Europe, a very uncertain future for the EU, particularly with Brexit and other far-right movements gaining strength. If she was to be, for some unexpected reason, out of the running, how much of a vacuum might that create in terms of German and European leadership?
There certainly would be a vacuum, simply because due to the fact that she has been the most powerful European politician for the last decade or so. Nevertheless, I don't think the vacuum would be that large, seeing that Germany politically wouldn't change too much anyway. We would still have the same party leading Germany, the same second strongest party, and the personnel would change, but the elections wouldn't change too much. So I don't think the vacuum would be too big.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Leopold Target, for your analysis.